last night.
Oh. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari
Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari
Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana
Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 18, texts 30 through 32. 30 and 31 don't have purports. Let's see which one would be most advantageous. So I'll read through 30 and 31 and we can chant 32 together. Nahushaya sutam dattva sahasarmishtayoshana tamaharajan charmishtam adhastaupe nakarhichit. When Shukracharya gave Devayani in marriage to Yayati, he had Sharmishta go with her, but he warned the king, "My dear king, never allow this girl Sharmishta to lie with you in your bed." 31. Vilokyaushanashim rajan charmishta suprajam kvachit tameva vavre rahasi sakyapatim rataut sati. O King Parikshit, on seeing Devayani with a nice son, Sharmishta once approached the King Yayati at the appropriate time for conception. In a secluded place, she requested the king, the husband of her friend Devayani, to enable her to have a son also. And text 32. Rajaputryartito patye Dharmam chavekshya dharmavit Smaran shukravacha kale Dishtamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyartito patye Dharmam chavekshya dharmavit Smaran shukravacha kale Dishtamevabhyapadyata Rajaputya Tito Patye
Rajaputya Patye
Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavat
Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit
Smaran Chukravacha Kale
Smaran Shukravacha Kale
Dishtamevabhyapadyata
Distamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyarthito Patye Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit Smaran Shukravacha Kale Distamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyarthito Patye Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit Smaran Shukravacha Kale Distamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyarthi Topatye Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit Smaran Shukravacha Kale Distamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyarthito Patye Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit Smaran Shukravacha Kale Distamevabhyapadyata Rajaputyarthito Patye Dharmam Chaviksha Dharmavit Smaran Shukravacha Kale Distamevabhyapadyata.
Word to word. Rajaputya
Rajaputya
by Sharmishta, who was the daughter of a king.
Sharmishta, who was the daughter of the king.
Artitaha,
Artita,
being requested. Apatye,
Patye,
for a son.
for a son.
Dharmam,
Dharmam,
religious principles.
religious principles.
Cha,
Cha,
as well as. Aveksha,
Aveksha,
considering. Dharmavit,
Dharmavit,
aware of all religious principles.
aware of all religious principles.
Smaran,
Smaran,
remembering. Shukravacha,
Shukravacha,
the warning of Shukracharya.
the warning of Shukracharya.
Kale,
Kale,
at the time.
at the time.
Dishtam,
Distam,
circumstantially. Eva,
Eva,
indeed. Abhyapadyata,
Abhyapadyata,
accepted to fulfill the desire of Sharmishta.
accepted to fulfill the desire of Sharmishta.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When Princess Sharmishta begged King Yayati for a son, the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembered the warning of Shukracharya, he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Sharmishta. Responsibly, please. When Princess Sharmishta begged King Yayati for a son,
When Princess Sharmishta begged King Yayati for a son,
the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion,
the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion,
and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire.
and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire.
Although he remembered the warning of Shukracharya,
Although he remembered the warning of Shukracharya,
he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme,
he thought of this union as a desire of the Supreme,
And thus he had sex with Sharmishta.
And thus he had sex with Sarvishta.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. King Yayati was completely aware of the duty of a Kshatriya. When a Kshatriya is approached by a woman, he cannot deny her. This is a religious principle. Consequently, when Dharmaraj Yudhishthir saw Arjuna unhappy after Arjuna returned from Dwaraka, he asked whether Arjuna had refused a woman who had begged for a son. Although Maharaj Yayati remembered Shukracharya's warning, he could not refuse Sharmishta. He thought it wise to give her a son, and thus he had sexual intercourse with her after her menstrual period. This kind of lust is not against religious principles. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma viruddha bhuteshu kamosmi. Sex life not contrary to the principles of religion is sanctioned by Krishna. Because Sharmishta, the daughter of a king, had begged Yayati for a son, their combination was not lust, but an act of religion. Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militang yena tasmai shri gurave namaha mukhaṁ karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamahang bande shri gurun dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyang Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. When Shukracharya gave Devayani in marriage to Yayati, he had Sharmishta go with her. But he warned the king, "My dear king, never allow this girl Sharmishta to lie with you in your bed." O King Parikshit, on seeing Devayani with a nice son, Sharmishta once approached King Yayati at the appropriate time for conception. In a secluded place, she requested the king, the husband of her friend Devayani, to enable her to have a son also. Just see what gentle language. Maybe a little euphemistic. When Princess Sharmishta begged King Yayati for a son, the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembered the warning of Shukracharya, he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Sharmishta. So here again, we get a clue about how complicated life in the material world can be. We're sometimes presented with an array of choices that's difficult. We may find difficult to navigate. We also see how Yayati tends to defer to, these are scare quotes or air quotes for those in audio land, the will of providence. When Devayani suggested to him that, well, you're stuck with me now, pal. we found ourselves in this awkward position, and now we have to get married. He knew that was against social conventions, which is a level of dharma. Still, he thought, well, what's she going to do? No one's going to have her now. No one else will marry her now. Just as we see when, when those princesses who Krishna rescued, he had to marry them. That was dharma, because they had been in another person's house, albeit involuntarily, having been kidnapped. So Krishna agreed to marry them. He gave them his shelter because he knew that they would be bereft otherwise. Of course, this was all Leela, but that's the surface purpose. Who was it? There was in the Mahabharata, one of the three, was it Ambika? Ambika and Ambalika? I can't remember which of those three. I haven't read Mahabharata for a while. Who spent some time in someone else's home, and she insisted that Bhishma must marry her, but he had taken this Bhishma Vrata, he had taken this terrible vow never to have any connection with a woman, in order that his father would be able to marry who he wanted. And he was stuck, as we say here in the U.S., between a rock and a hard place. And so there was that was one of the threads of the drama that spins itself out in the Mahabharata. She came back as a warrior, Shikandi, to deal the fatal blow to Bhishma. And there are so many other instances that we see where there's some awkwardness, and so therefore we have to do, as Srila Prabhupada, do the needful, as he would say. Still, I notice this tendency, it must be God's will, this must be providential, and he knew better. I mean, the verse says explicitly, although he remembered Shukracharya's admonition, don't touch her, don't even bring her to your bed. When she asked, there was another consideration. And this is a woman who's already in an awkward position herself. She's the daughter of the king, but she's living in the home of another king as the maidservant. I think in England they called them ladies in waiting, part of the retinue of the queen. And so she was in an awkward position anyway. And then she saw her best friend, her BFF, with a beautiful son, and she just thought, I want a baby too. So she approached Yayati, and so Yayati's weighing all these things, and he just figured, okay, the final weight must be, this is the will of providence. On the one hand, I've got my father-in-law's warning, don't even do this, don't even think about it. On the other hand, I've got this poor girl, this poor young woman, approaching me, asking me for a son so she can have something in common with her friend, like a sister. And let's see, how do we, this must be providential. Otherwise, how could it happen? I kind of was faced with that. I had to adopt that same thing when circumstances happened previous to my accepting sannyas. I had this dream that I mentioned the other night, and then other things just kind of lined up, and they were extremely painful, extremely awkward, but I couldn't make any sense of the fact that all these things were happening the way they were happening, except that it was providential. And that was the only way I was able to kind of keep my cool, I guess, as all these things were spinning out. So Yayati thinks, okay, she's in this position, and after all, there's one consideration in which this is not adharmic. This is not against dharma. It's the duty of a kshatriya when he's approached by a woman who asks him for a son to respond affirmatively. So here we go. Now we're going to see what happens next. So Srila Prabhupada talks about this business of considering the time for conception. Of course, in the third canto we see different kinds of consideration for time and place for sexual union. And so when Diti approaches Kashyapa, even though it's at a bad time, he assents, and then we get a nice boy like Hiranyaksha. What a sweetheart. So that's one kind of consideration, but here we see that Sharmishta has approached him at the time she's most fertile. And the householders know that there are different ways to figure this out. And so this is when she approached him at the perfect time for conception. So this also contributes to the dharmic nature. The Srila Prabhupada of this particular union. So Srila Prabhupada points out that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna just how it is that he's the absolute truth, and what are some of the implications of that. And so Srila Prabhupada says here that sex life that's contrary to the principles of religion is not contrary to the principles of religion, is sanctioned by Krishna. But actually Krishna goes further than that in that verse. He actually identifies with that. Not only sanctioned, but as pure as I am. So this is not, this is when these things are within the bounds of dharma, then it's actually a pure activity, and it's something that's not going to necessarily interfere with our making spiritual progress. And we need to remember that Panchama Purushartha, right? That fifth goal of human life, that fifth great value of human life, which is Krishna Prema. So, we talk about love in the material world. And just like you see the kind of been a cliche for a very long time, the Hollywood guys saying, "Oh, God, I love you, man." And everybody, "Yeah, I love you, I love you." And it's, it's really just kind of a sort of emphatic communication. It's not meant to say anything other than, we're cool. But then there are different varieties and degrees of love that we experience in the material world. And Kama, the word kama has a range of translations to English. One, which Srila Prabhupada uses most frequently, is lust. Because, and we call it lust because whatever we do in the material world, to the extent that we're conditioned, to that extent there's going to be some degree of self-interest, self-motivation. Desire for self-gratification involved in, in any, I was going to say transaction, but that's not what I want. There's no love in transactional behavior. That's all lust. Just like some devotees would point out that such and such a politician was a great Vaishya. And and I would think about that for a moment, and it only took a moment, and compare the description that we see, especially in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, of the characteristics of a Vaishya. And there's one characteristic that this one person that they would be talking about answered to, that resonates with his character, and that is the endless desire for more and more wealth, greater and greater wealth. All the other characteristics of the Vaishya that are described in that verse in the 11th canto are all quite virtuous. And they have to do with service to the Lord and the brahmanas, etc. But this one person, the only characteristic in that list that I can see that person answers to, Shri Radha Madhava Hari Hari Shri Nachi Gopal Shri Gaur Nitai Gaur Hari Ki Jai. Is that greed, insatiable desire for wealth. And we see this in some of these so-called Vaishyas. These people, they create more and more wealth for themselves, and not necessarily so much for other people. I saw something once where, who was it? Some philosopher was saying that if we observe a monkey hoarding all the bananas for himself and not leaving any bananas for any of the other monkeys in the group, we would wonder what's wrong with that monkey. But when we see a human being hoarding money like some of these people, we think, oh, he's really cool. So it's a little strange. So we have these different kind of stratas of dharma, and to the extent that we're conditioned, the love that we experience is going to be tinged by self-interest. However, as I mentioned before, there's a kind of a spectrum, even in this material world, and there is love that's progressive. There is love that's more, some love that's more selfless than other love. So, Srila Prabhupada even admitted that in this world we see the closest thing to real selfless love is a mother's love for a child. And that's quite an amazing thing to see. How a mother is able to sacrifice everything, starting with sleep. First, that's the first thing that goes out the window when a child is born. is sleep. It just, you try to grab naps when you can. And I remember when our older daughter was first born, she was up all the time. And she insisted on waking up every morning at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock. So when she was very, very little, my wife gave her the nickname of Mangalarti Devi Dasi, because she was there to make sure that I was up for Mangalarti. That mother's love, but even romantic love, it can be selfless. People are willing to actually sacrifice all kinds of things for another person. So there are degrees of love. So we don't want to dismiss too easily, the idea of love in this material world. We can recognize it where we actually see it, and celebrate it. So that love, whether it's friendly love, romantic love, parental love, or whatever, is to the extent that it's selfless, that's something that we can celebrate. But what our real aim is real love, complete giving, and we see that we see the zenith of such selfless love, of course, in the gopis of Vrindavan. There's a verse that Srila Prabhupada would cite, saying that Krishna is certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Vrindavan is his eternal abode, as good as he is. And the love that was demonstrated by the damsels of Vrindavan is the highest form of devotion. And it's not so much the external expression of that love that makes it the highest love. It's the motivation, which is, whatever Krishna wants. When the gopis heard the sound of Krishna's flute at night, everything was set aside. They dropped everything on the spot. Put their babies down. Neglected whatever was on the stove. If they were in the middle of getting dressed, then they just ran out and just threw clothes on however they could. And to answer that call, there's, let's see if I still have this open. I bet I don't. There's a verse, if we look at some of the verses in the Gopi Gita, a part of one of my sankalpas for Kartik for many years has been to chant the Gopi Gita every day. And over the last few years, some years I've been able to get some devotees to chant with me, which makes it even more relishable. And so we know chapter 31, after Krishna has called the gopis to the forest for the rasa dance, and there's so much going on, and then all of a sudden Krishna disappears, and it seems he's disappeared with one special gopi. Apparently she's very, very special. She's never named. Shukadev hints at her with one word in one verse. But the acharyas explain that if he were to actually say her name, he would be stunned in bhava, and he would experience pralaya, I guess. And he didn't want to do that because the clock's ticking on King Parikshit. And Shukadev knows he has to get through this whole thing for Parikshit so that he actually knows what the real duty of someone who's on the verge of death is. And that is to love Krishna. So he doesn't actually mention her name. And so then they see, 2 sets of footprints. She must be very special. And then they see one set of footprints, but a little deeper in the dust. And he must be carrying on her back. She must be so special. And then the next thing they see is her sitting alone, devastated. And then they get together and they sing these 19 verses, which are at once praising Krishna and criticizing him, sometimes in the harshest of ways. So the very second verse, just the second verse of the Gopi Gita, in the first verse they say, your birth in the land of Vraja has made it exceedingly glorious, and it's only for your sake that we're able to maintain our lives. We've been looking everywhere for you, so please show yourself to us. So this is the opening. Krishna's completely disappeared. They're completely lost, and they're losing their minds. And then in the second verse they sing, Sadhudashaye sadhu chata sat sarasi jodara Sri Mushadusha Suratanatate shulkadasika Varada nignato neha kingvada. O Lord of love, in beauty your glance excels the whorl of the finest, most perfectly formed lotus within the autumn pond. O bestower of benedictions, you are killing your maidservants who have given themselves to you freely. Come on, show yourself to us. You're killing us. But then they say, who have given themselves to you freely without any price. And then they say, isn't this murder? And then later they point out how in 16, Patisutan baya pratir bandhavan mativilangyate intyachutagata gati vedastitavod gita mohita kitava yoshita kascha jenishi. Dear Achyuta, you know very well why we have come here. Who but a cheater like you would abandon young women who come to see him in the middle of the night, enchanted by the loud song of his flute? And there's something there in that phrase that I find a little edgy. There's a little spark there, enchanted by the loud song of his flute. Just to see you, we've completely rejected our husbands, children, ancestors, brothers, and other relatives. They've given up everything. They've sacrificed everything, including the reputation of their families. No, the reputation of their village to answer the call of Krishna's flute. That is the mood of the gopis for which we should aspire. I can't remember where it was now, but I read something once that when we accept Tridandi sannyas in our sampradaya, there are a few things we accept. One is Achyuta Gotra. We don't have any family other than Krishna's family. We're part of Krishna's family, that's it. We use that for all the Vaishnavas, right? When we do sacrifice, when the priest is invoking the beneficiaries of the sacrifice, they state their names, where they live, and their Gotra. And for Vaishnavas, we say Achyuta Gotra. But another thing that we accept is a mantra, and this mantra is there are actually two versions. I discovered this, two versions. One, worshiping, offering obeisance, offering respect to Gopi Bhava, and the other to Gopi Jana Bhava. So. Worshipping, offering respects to the mood of the gopis, and the other is the Gopi Jana, the Gopi people. So it's a broader, perhaps a broader version. And I know, I have the evidence, that I have the receipts, as we say nowadays, that Srila Prabhupada gave both versions to sannyasi, some of his sannyasi disciples. Gopi Bhava to one, Gopi Jana Bhava to others. And it's this aspect of the Gopi Bhava, that sacrificing everything. And as I mentioned also the other day, we're we receive a danda, a staff, made of 3 or 4 bamboo rods together. And these symbolize our surrendering of our body, speech, and thoughts, and indeed our very self to the service of Mukunda. So that's the highest reach of love, complete self-abandonment. This is one of the 6 aspects as well of Sharanagati, Atma Nivedana or Atma Nikshepa. One devotee explained to me that Nikshepa means throwing away, casting away, very vigorously, just like, ugh. You pick something up, you see it's really something really gross, and you just go, ugh. So like that. And Srila Prabhupada often translated, he often characterized this Atma Nikshepa or Atma Nivedana as having no interest other than the Lord's interest. That's the highest reaches of love. So we have this range of complete selfishness, kama, and then we've got the kama of the gopis, which is something completely different, some sui generis. It's in a class of its own, not to be compared with anything else. Okay, I will stop here and entertain any discussion. Look at me, stopping on time. What's wrong with him? Any questions, comments? Well, thank you for that as well. This is one instance when no questions is a welcome response. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. And thanks to Prema Tatri and Rajesh and all the devotees of ISKCON Phoenix for this weekend. It's been a delight. It's been a little while coming. We've been working on it, and we finally found a time, Prema Tatri and I finally found a time that clicked for both of us, and I'm very grateful for the kindness and inspired to see what a vibrant community has grown here at ISKCON of Phoenix. And I would be delighted if I were allowed to come back again sometime and have your company, maybe for even a little longer. We'll see. Thank you all so much. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha. Patitanam